The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi everyone, welcome to our third session of the Star Rating for Designs webinar series. I am Alessandra Fransoia, the Training and Accreditation Coordinator at iRAP. I'll be your moderator today. And we have our two presenters, Greg Smith, the Managing Director of Strategic Projects Division at iRAP. Hi Greg.
Hi everyone, hi Ali.
And Morgan Fletcher, the Senior Road Safety Engineer at iRAP. Hi Morgan.
Hi Ali, hi everyone. Thanks for joining us.
And our webinar is planned to last between 60 and 75 minutes. We'll have time for questions. Everyone is muted, or all the attendees are muted in this session, but you are welcome to post your questions on our chat. We'll have breaks during the presentation to read your questions and answer them. If we don't answer your questions during the webinar, we'll post them on Schoology for you. Here you can see that Greg has already answered some of your questions from session 1 and session 2. So have a look there, and if you haven't registered on Schoology, take your time and do that, because you'll find more resources there as well, and your assignments. And today, what we'll have today, Greg, for this session?
Thanks, Ali. So in this third webinar, we're going to focus on how to estimate the change in fatalities and serious injuries as a result of the design that we've created. So we've created the assessment for the existing road, then for the design, and now we're looking at how many lives we might save as a result of that design. We're also going to look at what we call an investment plan. So that's some extra suggestions about how the design could be enhanced to save some extra lives. So we're going to show you how to do that. It's got two parts. We've got a theory part and then a practical part. Then in the next webinar, we're going to review some of the work that we've done, talk about quality assurance and reporting, and then an extended chance to answer some questions that you have. So the content of today's webinar is we're going to start as usual with a review of your assignments. And then we're going to talk a little about how to calibrate data sets to do that fatality and serious injury estimates. And that's going to be sort of complemented by some methodology and theory to begin with, and then a practical demonstration. We'll do the same thing for the investment plan process as well. So I'm going to talk through some of the methodology first, and then Morgan is going to talk about the practical aspects of using VEDA to do that process. And what we want from you at the end of this webinar is another assignment, and this is where you're going to produce your own fatalities and serious injuries estimates and develop your own investment plan. So just to jump into the review of your assignments, we've really great to see those assignments coming in. So we've got lots of assignments now in for webinar 1, assignment 1, lots also in now from assignment 2, from webinar 2. And if you haven't done your assignments yet, no matter, you still have time to do it. Don't worry if the system says you're running late. We're going to allow some time for you to go in there and do your assignments still. And each time if you've done those assignments, assignment 1 and 2, Alessandra has given you a report in Excel that compares your coding for the existing road and the design with what we call our best coding. And like I said in the previous webinar, sometimes our coding might not actually be the best, but it's our coding that we've done. So we've compared your coding with ours. So take a look at that report, and it gives you some tips about how you might change your coding or improve your coding, or give you some topics to discuss with us. It's totally fine for you to say, you know what, I don't agree with your coding. Your best coding we don't think is, or I don't think is the best. Definitely happy to have a discussion about how we might improve the coding. Just a few tips based on some of the feedback that we've had so far from assignment 2. Looking back at those designs that we gave you, a couple of tips. The street light in the cross section that we gave, we said that's a rigid lighting pole. So we're assuming that that's not flexible. It's not what we call a frangible pole. So when you hit it, it's going to be basically a solid object. So you can code that as a fixed pole. And also the paved shoulder. In our baseline coding, our existing road coding, we assumed that it's less than 2.4 meters wide. Therefore, the sidewalk that we've installed is going to be between 1 and 3 meters offset from the edge of the travel lane. So we've got that 1 to 3 meters. So that's what we're thinking with that. And also had an interesting question about whether this should be coded as a wide centerline or not. And yeah, it's a very interesting question. I think if this were to extend these thicker lines, the center line, I guess the tapered chevron lines, if that were to extend for more than 100 meters, then probably, yeah, we could say that's a wide centerline treatment. If it's for less than 100 meters, so still within the 100-meter segment, there's some standard center line in place, we'd probably say no, we're going to code it on that worst case, which is the regular center line. So in this case, in our coding so far, we said no. So that's kind of some of a couple of points that we've been thinking with our design coding. But as I said before, more than happy to have a discussion about that. And if there's any debate or disagreement, very happy to hear it from you, and we can discuss it. Couple of temporary issues to be aware of when you're doing your coding is when you do the coding in the star rating for design system, and particularly looking at the road sides, we have the left side and the right side. And so looking at that image, the left side is on our left where the grass is. When you download your data, what actually happens is that data then goes into the roadside, driver side columns, so columns A, C, N, A, D. And really it should go into the passenger side. So what we're talking about, driver and passenger side, is which side of the vehicle the driver and the passenger sit in when they're traveling along the road. So that white car that we're looking at, the driver side is on the right-hand side of the vehicle and the passenger side is on the left-hand side of the vehicle. And so the what you can see is the left-hand side of the image is actually the passenger side. So technically what's happening, I think, is the data is going into the wrong columns. So that's a temporary issue that we know about and that we will fix in time. But at the moment, it's just something for you to be aware of when you're downloading your coding. And another temporary issue that we know of is that if you use punctuation in your comments field, and probably in your landmarks field, and when we talk about punctuation, I'm talking about semicolons, commas, full stops, forward slash, maybe backslash. I think they cause a problem when you're trying to upload your data back into the system. And so this is one of the times in your life you're totally allowed to do sentences and write sentences without any punctuation. So don't add any of that for the moment. I'm trying to keep it as simple as possible, and I think that will solve some of the problems that we've seen with people trying to upload data into the system.
So
and Ali, do we have any? Yeah, we have some questions.
We have one question from Estiara. Can we code more than one variable for the object? For example, that the area has tree and also houses?
Yeah, very, very good question. No is the answer to that. We can just record one object per 100 meters. So pick the worst case object.
Okay, I'll hand over to Greg now to continue the presentation.
Okay, so that's just coming up on my screen now. One moment. So yeah, while you're doing your coding, and let me just open this up. Sorry about this little delay. While you're doing your coding, don't hesitate to ask any questions. And like I said before, it's totally possible that Morgan and I, have made errors when we're doing the coding. And we'll be able to discuss that a little bit more in the next webinar, which talks about the quality assurance process. So now what I want to get into is some of the, I guess, the theory or the methodology about how we estimate fatalities and serious injuries using the model. You might remember from webinar number 1 that I showed a chart, or this chart, where we said we can use the tool to estimate the numbers of deaths and serious injuries, or fatalities and serious injuries, that happen on a design, And in that case, we looked at design version number 1, where we estimated 41. Design version 2, like an update of the design, where we got to 15 deaths and serious injuries, and then the upgraded road. So what we're really focusing on is the question of how do we determine those fatalities and serious injuries for the design versions. One really important thing to be familiar with in this process is what we call the star rating scores. So within the star ratings, the 1-star, 2-star, so forth through to 5-star, there are scores that underpin those. And what you can do is on your data sets, when you go into VIDA and look at the reports, if you click on the star rating menu, you can go to the risk worm option. And what that will produce is a chart that looks just like this. Along the horizontal of the chart is the distance along the road. So you can see starting at 0, 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, etc. Then on the vertical axis, you've got the star rating score. So this is the actual score that's calculated when we bring together those road attribute risk factors that we talked about in webinar number 1. And in this case, you can see that blue line. It starts at 0, 0, and I'm looking at the top chart here. Starts at distance 0, and it's about a score of 45. Then it goes along up to about 60, and then down to about 12, and sort of hovers around that 12 or a little bit low mark for the rest of the road. In the background, you can see the color bands. So green, starting from the bottom, green, yellow, orange, red, and black. They're the star rating bands. So what it's really saying is those first 2 points are in the 1-star category. The next dot at 0.2 kilometers, I think, is just into the 2-star category, and so forth. And because you can see 2 charts here, one is showing the design, so that's on the top, in the top chart, and the existing road is in the bottom. So this is showing for motorcyclists star rating scores, and you can see our design had a small impact on the scores on the designs. But if you were to produce this risk worms for your existing road and the design for the pedestrians, you'll see much larger changes because the design was largely focused on pedestrian facilities. So these star rating scores are really, really important in understanding how we do the fatality estimations. So the way that the process works, and this is a simplified demonstration, is that we start with what we call a known number of fatalities on the road or road network. The reason I've put known in inverted commas there is because we ideally will take reported data, that's data collected by the police or the road authorities and officially reported. So ideally we take that actual number. In some cases though, that number might not be available. It's not that uncommon to find that data is not available for a particular road, or it's only available for a particular road user type, or the data set is kind of not complete. Maybe we know that about half the deaths are being recorded, but maybe the other half, the data has been recorded at some point, but hasn't made its way into the official system. So that's why we've said in inverted commas, we start with a known number of fatalities. And this really is an important point to understand about the iRAP model. It's not really a predictive model in that it will predict the number of deaths along the road. What it will do is take a known number of deaths and distribute them along the road. And that then is a very powerful set of data that we can use to start to test the effect of making changes to the roads. So when you're doing an iRAP analysis, you do need some skills in understanding how to make that initial estimate, the number of fatalities on a road or network. And that takes a little bit of experience and knowledge about the data that's available and what adjustments to that data might be reasonable to get to a reasonable starting point. So we take that known number of fatalities on the road or road network, then we distribute those to each 100 meters along the road. So on our road that we're using in assignment 1 and 2, you can see it has those 100-meter sections, and we will distribute our known number of deaths onto each one of those 100-meter sections according to the traffic flow or the flow, the star rating score, and what we call a calibration factor. And so what you can see, or what you do see, is the number of fatalities that get distributed to each 100-meter section. It varies 100-meter section by 100-meter section. Because the star rating score and the flow they can vary by 100 meters by 100 meters. Normally, you don't find that the flow actually does vary that much, but it's possible. So that flow and star rating score, it can vary from 100 meters to 100 meters. But importantly, those two things can also vary between the existing road situation and the design. So you imagine we have an existing road with the star rating scores like that was shown in the chart on the previous slide, and then you change the design, that therefore changes the star rating score, and that therefore has an impact on the way that the deaths are distributed across the road. Then we've got this calibration factor, and this factor is fixed for every 100 meters along the road, and it's fixed for the existing and the design scenarios. So this is an important factor that's calculated as part of the iRAP methodology. And to find out more about that factor, you can take a look at that fact sheet that's available on the website. In fact, all the methodology that we talk about is available in these fact sheets on the website. So definitely it's worth taking a look at that. It can be a slightly complex, or it is a complex topic sometimes to get your head around, but it's one of those things, if you take the time to read the methodology, and usually I find if I get an Excel spreadsheet out and start experimenting, it's an easy way to start understanding what we're talking about. But I'm going to give you a quick and simple example to try and illustrate how these are calculated. So let's say we're starting with a road that's 500 meters long. And so it has those distances starting at 0, 0.1, 0.2, 3, and 4. And our known number of deaths is 5. So let's say we have 5 deaths a year on this 500 meters section of road. And we might have got that from police records. And maybe that's an average annual number for the last 3 years. So we've got 5 deaths happening on that section. Then what we'll also know is the traffic flow and the star rating score for the existing road scenario. So in this case, we're just assuming that the traffic flow is consistent across all of those 100-meter segments. And in this case, we're saying it's 5,000. So this, remember, just a simple example that we're using, and it's probably easiest to think about us just talking about vehicle occupant deaths just for the moment. So we might say our annual average daily flow is 5,000 across all of these 100-meter segments. We've also calculated our star rating scores, and we've got those by doing the coding for the road, producing the star ratings, and then coming into the feeder reporting and taking a look at that risk worm to see what the star rating scores are. So the higher the score, the higher the risk. So you can see the highest risk section is this 4.5, and lower one is 1.4. What the model then does is an initial estimate, and it multiplies these two things together. So it'll multiply the flow by the star rating score for each one of those 100 meters. And that's an initial estimate of the numbers of deaths on the road. And we're going to get 72. So this is what we call an uncalibrated estimate by the model. So at the moment, it's not really anywhere near the exact number of 5, but it's giving us these relative numbers along each 100-meter segment of road. So then what we do is calculate the calibration factor. And the calibration factor is the known number of deaths divided by the initial estimate. So it's 5 deaths divided by 72 gives us this calibration factor of 0.07. Then our fatalities on each 100-meter segment is a function of the flow, the star rating score, and the calibration factor. So we multiply, in the first case, 5 by 2.5 by 0.07, and that gives us 0.9. So add those up and we're back at 5. So what this is really saying is, okay, we've taken that 5, the known number of deaths, and distributed that along 100-meter segments of road according to the flow and the star rating for score and the calibration factor. And so it's unsurprising that this section with the highest star rating score has got the highest number of deaths assigned to it, 1.6. And this section with 1.4 score has the lowest number assigned to it. So now we've got this calibrated data set. We've got an estimate of how many deaths are occurring each year on each 100-meter segment of road. Then what we do is take a look at the design road. So let's say our design, we don't change the flow. So we don't see any reason why the flow on this road is going to change as a result of the design. So it's still set to 5,000 or 5 for our calculations. But the star rating scores are quite different. And that's because maybe we added safety barriers, pedestrian footpaths, or roundabouts, etc. Actually, things that we know are going to influence the risk of these 5 deaths happening. And for most cases, all cases, the scores have gone down. So we can see the score went from 2.5 on the first segment down to 1.3. So we go through the same process again as we did for the existing road, except we already know what the calibration factor is for this road. It's 0.07. So we multiply those 3 things together and we have our new estimate of fatalities and fatalities on this road under the design situation. So what we're basically saying is, as a result of the design, we would expect the number of fatalities to go from 0.9 down to 0.5 on the first segment. And overall, we'd estimate that there would be a reduction in deaths from 5 down to 3.5 as a result of the design being implemented. And so that gives us our estimate of lives saved as a result of the design. So we're going to save 1.5 lives as a result of the design on this road. So that's a very simple example about how the calibration process works. And Morgan's going to show you the process of running this in VIDA, but this is really what's going on in the background. It is actually a little more complex than this, especially since there's calibration factor for each road crash type and for each road user type. So there's quite a lot of calculations going on in the background, but this is a simple summary. And it's useful if you have time, take these numbers, paste them into an Excel spreadsheet and experiment a little. So you start to get a bit of an intuitive feel about the effects of changing scores and changing flows. Importantly, you can see that even if you don't change the star rating score, even if the flow changes, then that can affect the estimate of numbers of deaths and serious injuries on your road. So any increase in the flow, i.e. an increase in exposure, can result in an increase in the number of lives lost on the road. So these factors, you can get a sense of how the interplay between them on a road might play out. So that's the fatalities estimation process. And we can also talk a little about the Safer Roads investment plan. So that's the second part of really what this webinar is about. And the question is really, what is a Safer Roads investment plan? Well, essentially what it is a process for answering the question of how can we improve the star rating for our roads? How many lives could be saved? How much would it cost to do that? And which countermeasures should we focus on? So the plan helps you to answer each of these questions. And in the context of star rating for designs, we can apply it to the design. So we can say, what else can we do to this design to improve its star ratings and save lives? And the plan looks a little something like this. So the table in VIDA will give you a list of the different countermeasures that have been suggested, the length over which they could be applied, an estimate of the fatalities and serious injuries saved, pretty much using that same process that I just talked about, the present value safety benefit, a dollar estimate of the benefits of saving those deaths and serious injuries, as well as an estimate of the cost, which also can give us a cost per fatality and serious injury saved and a benefit cost ratio. And there's also some interactive maps that VIDA produces, which helps you to really zoom in on where those countermeasures have been proposed. The process is quite involved and quite complex, and I won't go into a huge amount of detail here. Again, the fact sheets that I was talking about for the methodology on the website, they explain each of these steps in quite a bit more detail. But we begin with that fatality and serious injury estimate process that I was talking about a little earlier. The model will then say what sort of countermeasures could be triggered on this road. So if the road has poor delineation, the model will automatically say improving that delineation, that's something worth considering. It'll then run the economic analysis, which essentially asks the question, will I save more dollars in terms of lives saved and serious injuries avoided by implementing this countermeasure than it costs. So it's going to ask the question, is it economically worth trying to do that countermeasure? It'll look at some of the what we call the overrides. So the countermeasures with very low benefit cost ratios tend to get removed. And then it applies some rules as well. So we might say a pedestrian bridge, even though it might be triggered and economically viable to build one every 100 meters along the road, in a place where there's very high pedestrian crossing and flows, for example, practically speaking, that's not really realistic. So the model will say, actually, we're going to require at least 300-meter spacing between those bridges. And then it produces the new star ratings and the new fatality and serious injury estimates. So the model will go through a test running each one of these steps for every single countermeasure for every 100 meters of road. And what it produces is this plan with some suggestions about how your design could be improved. And so Morgan in the practical session is going to show you how to set that up and how to run that in Vida. And as I said, if you really want to know the mechanics of how it's working behind the scenes, those fact sheets are really the things that are going to help you get a picture about that. So there's a very, very quick, a whirlwind tour through the methodology about the fatality and serious injury estimates and the countermeasure planning, the investment planning. Does anyone have any questions at the moment, Ali?
We have a question from Cardina. She's asking, is the calibration factor appropriate for all of the countries? Because each country has different characteristics.
Yeah, fantastic question. It's one of my favorite questions about the iRAP model. So I'm going to give you a little thought experiment to hopefully help explain how this works. So imagine we have two roads, and road number 1 is in country number 1, and road number 2 is in country number 2. These roads are designed exactly the same way, and people drive on them in exactly the same speeds. And so let's say both of these roads are 3-star roads. They're exactly the same design, nothing different. The roadsides are the same, the intersections are the same, all the features are exactly the same, including the alignment, etc. So they're both 3-star roads. It's possible, though, to have different numbers of deaths happening on these roads because of factors outside of the design themselves. Because we know that in road safety, there's other factors that influence the risk of people dying. So there's behavioral factors about how people behave on the road. Do they wear their helmets when they're motorcycling? Do they wear seatbelts when they're driving? And the types of vehicles that people are driving in as well. In one country, there might be vehicles that are very high performance in crash tests. So in the NCAP, the global NCAP testing, maybe in one country, typically cars perform better than the other country. So for these two roads that are exactly the same star rating, it's possible to have different numbers of deaths. So let's say in country number 1, let's say we're talking about vehicle occupant deaths. Let's say in country number 1, people never wear their seatbelts, never ever. But in country number 2, they always wear their seatbelts. Now we know that seatbelt wearing is a really important factor in determining the risk of being killed in a crash. So let's say in both these countries, we have a series of crashes that you would expect to occur on a 3-star road. They can still happen. So the same number of crashes occur. But because no one is wearing their seatbelt in I've forgotten which country is wearing no seatbelt now. Let's say number 2 is wearing no seatbelts. Then you would expect the risk or the number of people killed in those crashes to be higher than country number 1 because of that behavioral factor. So in the calibration of the model, by starting with the known numbers of deaths on each of the roads, so in country number 1, maybe we're starting with numbers of deaths of 10, but country number 2, we're starting with 20. Because we're calibrating with those different numbers, then the fatality estimations each 100 meters along the road reflects the context in which those roads are operating. So we would expect that although the star ratings are the same, the numbers of fatalities per 100 meters on each of those roads would be different because the context is different. Hopefully that answers the question.
We have one more question. Actually, we have plenty, so we'll answer another two, and then we can post later or stop again after the demonstration. Can the model consider traffic growth rates, given most projects are considered to have a 20-year design life? Or do we just consider the life saved per year and use discount factor for the crash costs each year?
Yeah, good question. Normally what we do is to keep it a little more simple. We don't actually take into account traffic growth over the 20-year period. We do make the estimate based on typically a 20-year analysis. So typical iRAP report will say, we expect that you could save 100 deaths and serious injuries over 20 years if you build this facility. The reason that we don't take into account often traffic growth is because it's really, really hard to forecast. That looking 20 years into the future can be really, really challenging. It is possible to say, okay, we expect that there'll be 2% growth or 5% growth over years, and there is a mechanism in the iRAP model to use that, absolutely. So there is a facility in the model to take into account traffic growth. It's just that we don't often use it. Usually what we find is the investment case, the benefit cost ratios that we come up with in the safety analysis, they're really usually really quite strong. So we're usually not short of many economically viable safety countermeasures that could be implemented on a road without even, like, before we even consider traffic volume growth. So yeah, that's our normal practice, but in short, yes, you can take account of traffic growth.
And then another question from Fahim is the fared flow considered in the model? Example, if vehicles are encouraged to take an alternate road, the star rating for the road may appear to improve, but risk may actually just be transferred to another part of the network?
Yeah, absolutely. So when you're doing your modeling, the best way to handle that is to make sure that you do the assessment for both roads at once. And the road where the traffic flow will decrease in your design scenario, you reduce the traffic flow in your coding file. So you can remember in one of the columns, we put the traffic volume in there, and in our assignments, we're using 5,000. So you might drop that down to 4,000, but on the second road, you increase it by 1,000. And so in that way, you can capture that effect. And it's an important effect. It's definitely important to try and capture the whole road safety picture and the implications of a change in planning or design in your modeling.
We have one question that actually 2 or 3 people are asking the same. How are the economics calculated given the variety of labor and material costs throughout the world? Can this be changed?
Yes, it can. And Morgan's going to show you within the model where you enter in some of these economic variables. And so these are totally flexible. These are variables that you have the chance to input when you're doing your analysis. So you decide what the cost of, for example, a meter of line marking or a kilometer of sidewalk will cost based on your local costs. And also we have a method for estimating the value of human life, which is used on the benefit side of the benefit cost ratio analysis. And again, we have a rule of thumb that we say or encourage people to use if there's no other data, but you can use local numbers as well. So you, especially when it comes to the investment planning, the economic side, it's very, I guess, adaptable. It's very much based on the variables that you choose.
Okay, shall we move on? And Morgan may answer some of the questions that are already here. And we'll stop again soon.
Sure, so I'm going to hand over control to you, Morgan, in a moment.
Thanks, Greg. Now we've covered some of the theory, we're going to jump into the VIDA website again and do a little practical demonstration. So I'm going to share my screen here. Let me show that. And you should be able to see All right, we're just getting everyone on board. You should be able to see the vida.irap.org homepage. So by now you should be able to log in and you should have your project set up. If you don't, please get in touch with Ali and we'll make sure you've got your account set up for that. We're going to be doing things a little bit differently today. So previously we've gone into this tool here, which is the star rating for designs tool. And we've also had a look at the results. Today, we're going to jump straight into the project setup and access. So here we are. I'm going to scroll down and find the projects that we've been working on for the last couple of weeks, last couple of sessions. So the first one here is the star rating for designs webinar existing road, and the second one is the star rating for designs webinar design. So first of all, I'm going to right click on the existing road and open that one in a new link, in a new tab, sorry. And then I'm going to do the same with the design. So open that link in a new tab. So just so I can jump between the two project setups and also have a look at the results in the third tab. So I'll be explaining as we go along which tab I'm looking at. So first of all, we want to jump into the setup for the existing road, and hopefully you'll be all able to see that one now. And in a normal project, we'd fill out all the information for stages 1 through to 8 here. For now, we're just going to jump straight into the fatality estimation in stage 5. And what we want to do here is basically apply what Greg showed in his slides on the fatality estimation, where he talked about putting in the known deaths on the network and then doing the calibration for the existing road and then applying that same calibration factor for the design. So here we are in stage 5 for the fatality estimation. I'm just going to put in some hypothetical data here. So let's say we have 24 reported deaths and the years covered are 2015 to 2018. Now we can click here on the calculate from years covered. That'll give us 4 deaths per year. Now the next option down here is the fatality underreporting factor. This is if, for example, you know that data is only collected for accidents or for fatalities that occur on the road. If they're taken to hospital, maybe and die in hospital, then perhaps that information is lost. So in some countries, you mightn't have the full picture of how many people are dying because of road accidents. And a good place to look is the UN Global Status Report for Road Safety. It'll show you the known number of fatalities, that's the fatalities recorded by either the road authority, the police, or the hospitals, and then an estimate based on how many people the UN think are being killed in a country per year. So for this practical exercise, we're just going to leave that as 1, but in some projects we might put that as maybe 20%. We're assuming that aren't captured in the known data. So if I press calculate here, that gives us 6 deaths per year from the 4 years that we're looking at. So for example, if I change that one to a 20% underreporting factor and calculated that one again, then you can see that jumps up 20%. But for now, let's just leave that as 1. We're assuming that all the deaths that occur on the road or in hospital after because of road accidents are recorded. And here you're going to put in the data source of where you get that information from. Now we need to do the calibration. You can see here that we need to get to this number here of on the left-hand side where we've got a calibration total of 6. So far, our assigned total based on these figures below is 0. So we need to, first of all, apply the user group distribution. So we're going to say that a quarter of the accidents or the fatalities are vehicle occupants. I'm just going to change this one here to just percentages. I'm going to also say for the motorcyclists we've got a quarter of the fatalities. Pedestrians, a quarter of the fatalities. And cyclists, a quarter of the fatalities. Once you've got the user group distribution correct, and this adds to a 100%, you'll notice that the assigned total will equal the calibration total, and this box will change from red to green. Now we've got these other little warnings coming up here saying the sum of vehicle occupant fatalities, let's hover over that one, does not equal the vehicle occupant user group values. So what we need to do now is look at all the different crash types for all the different user groups and make sure that these columns also add up to 100% now. So we've got run off road, loss of control driver's side, passenger side, head-on loss of control, head-on overtaking, intersection, property access, etc., etc. So I'm just going to put in some more hypothetical data here. Let's say 20% for looking at vehicle occupants, 20% runoff driver side, 20% runoff passenger side, 10% head-on, 20% head-on overtaking. Let's make sure, we've got to make sure that from here down to here it adds up to 100%. So I think we're getting close. And there we go. Once you've got this column here adding up to 100%, then that little warning up the top here, that little red notification will disappear. We've got a column down here for other. This is for some crash types that aren't picked up in the model, or for example, perhaps animal strikes and things like that, and also rear end accidents, which are currently not picked up in the model. You might need to apply a bit of a reduction based on those. Next up, motorcyclists. So let's just put in some more hypothetical data here. 15, 15, 10% overtaking. Intersections, this will be a bigger one, 20%. Property accesses, I think it'll, right, 25. Along 10, and I think I'm short by 10. Yeah, there we go. So once I've got 100%, that little warning will disappear. Now we'll repeat that process for pedestrians now. There we go, and we've just got one column left to go. That's bicyclists. So we might have a few bicyclists running off the road without being struck by a vehicle, but unlikely. Lots being killed at intersections as a percentage, and then the rest being struck as they're riding along the road. So now you can see that we've got no more little warnings up the top, the little red notifications, and our assigned total equals the calibration total. So our calibration is done now. This is using hypothetical data. You'll need to refer to your assignments to look at what data you should be putting in. So I'm going to save that stage there. And now that's saved in the system. I quickly just wanted to jump into stage 6, the investment plan here, and just look at one value in particular. So far, we're only looking at the fatality data. However, as you're aware, that's not the full story. There are a lot of serious injuries that also occur. So if we scroll down here, we've got a serious injuries to fatalities ratio. And the rule of thumb, the default value that we use on the network is 10 to 1, so 10 serious injuries to fatalities, to every single fatality. If you've got actual data from your network, if you've collected fatalities and serious injury data, then you're going to change this, but rule of thumb, it seems to be around 10. It might be a little higher in urban areas as the speeds are a bit lower, so you might have more serious injuries. And then in rural areas where you've got higher speeds, you'll see more fatalities as a percentage. So I'm just going to save that one now if I've made a change. We haven't made a change, so we don't need to. And then we are going to process that data here in stage 7. So you can see I've clicked on stage 7, and our options here are upload coding data, which we're not going to do. We're going to click here on reprocess all. So you can see that that data set's now reprocessing. And let's go and jump back into the results. I'm going to leave that tab there. I'm going to go back to the original tab that we had open and click back on the dashboard. So you can see down here that data is now processing. Greg, if you had any comments while this is processing, there we go.
Yeah, Morgan, I'd just say that putting that fatality data in by road user type and crash type, that's the part where knowing how to do an iRAP assessment requires some skill in knowing how to set up those fatality numbers. And ideally, you have those numbers, like the official numbers that you can plug straight in. Very often, you won't have all of that data, and so making an informed decision and estimate for those initial calibration numbers is really can be challenging and does need some skill. The good thing though is that you can experiment a little. Like you can run this process over and over again to get a sense of how it affects your results. And so when you're making your estimate, it's good to process that data a few times so that you can really get a sense of which factors are really influencing your assessment. And remember that calibration, it does not affect your star ratings for that data set. It only affects the fatality estimation. So the star ratings don't get changed by that calibration process.
Thanks. That's a really good point. In most of the projects that I work on, we will have fatality data separated by user group, but then we very rarely see it separated by the distribution by accident type. So that's where we need to make some assumptions. And then obviously we need to record those assumptions. Okay, that's processed now. So I'm going to jump into the results here. And we need to make sure we're looking at the correct road. So up the top here, we've got webinar existing road, which is correct. Now, what I'm interested in here is the fatality, the FSI estimation. So the fatality and serious injury estimation in the menu up the top. So I'm going to click on that one and click on table. So here we are. We've put in 25% or a quarter of the fatalities for each of the different road user groups. And then you can see we've got over here a total of fatalities and serious injuries estimated on the model per year of 66. So if you think about that, that ratio of fatalities to serious injuries that we used of 10:1, that means we've got 6 fatalities and 60 serious injuries each year happening on the network. Which, if you remember from the fatality estimation in stage 5, that's exactly what we had. We've estimated 6 fatalities on that network per year. So you can see that our calibrations worked successfully, looking at those results. And just to show you the investment plan, we haven't put any investment data in there, so we're not going to be able to see any suggestions from the model. as to what could be done to improve that that existing road. We haven't put any costs for the countermeasures, which is one of the questions that came up. We also haven't put in any of the economic value variables, for example, the value of a life, or how much a road authority can invest, can afford to invest in a road network to save a life. So what I'm going to do now is go back, not to the existing road tab. I'm going to jump straight into the design tab. So now we've got our calibration for the existing road. I'm going to use those same calibration factors for the design, and that will allow us to estimate the lives saved by through the implementation of the countermeasures that we looked at in the design. So again, I'm not going to look at stages 1 through 4. I'm going to jump straight into stage 5, the fatality estimation. And we're going to do it slightly differently here. Because we've already done the calibration for the existing case, we're not going to calibrate the model with a known number of deaths. We're going to import settings from another data set. So I'm going to click on this button here on the right-hand side, import settings from another data set. And we get this pop up, import stage 5 settings from another data set. It asks you here for a data set ID. Now, you probably won't know that one off the top of your head. So if I go back to this tab for the existing road, here, star rating for design, webinar, existing road. If I just click on the data set definition, which is stage 1, and scroll down, you get a data set ID here. So it's 11484. You'll also notice in the URL for this setup, we've also got that same number. So you can either grab it from here in stage 1, or simply here from the URL for the existing road. So I'm going to copy that 11484. I'm going to put it into here, where we're going to copy the same calibration factors from the existing road for the design. So now I'm going to click on continue, and it's going to ask me if I want to confirm that one or not, and give you a link here just to make sure you've selected the right one. So star rating for design, webinar, existing road, which is correct. I want to import the settings from that one to the design for the calibration. Now, one really important step here, for the existing road for stage 5, we had the calibration, the fatality estimate calibration, enabled as auto calibration. So that basically used the settings for the road and did the calibration for you. We want to, because we're going to use the same calibration factors from the existing road, we need to disable for this design the auto calibration. We know what our calibration factors are, so we want to use those instead of an auto calibration based on percentages of fatalities and the like. So you can see when I click on that, these values change here from percentages to actual calibration factors. So now what we're going to do is, we don't need to save that one. We're going to go straight into stage 7 again and process that one. I'm going to click here, stage 7, reprocess all. There we go. The data set has been scheduled for reprocessing. And if we go back to the dashboard, we can see the progress of that one. Unless it's already been pushed through, let's have a look. Back into the results. And now I don't want to just see filter 1 with the existing road. I want to add an additional filter. And I'm going to locate the design road that we've just been looking at here. So here we are, star rating for design webinar design road, and I'm going to apply that one. And again, we've already had a look at the star ratings and how they changed. So we're going to jump straight into the FSI estimation option here. And again, back into the table. And here you go. Up the top, we're looking at the existing road. We're comparing the two calibrations here, the FSI estimation for the two roads here. So up the top, we've got the existing road, and down the bottom in filter 2, we've got the design. So you can see through the slight changes that were made to the CSV file or the coding, that the model is now predicting or estimating that we're going to have a slight reduction in the number of fatalities and serious injuries. So for vehicle occupants, the fatality and serious injury estimate goes from 16.5 down to 16.2. Or in other words, the model's estimating that we'll save 0.3 fatalities and serious injuries per year. For motorcyclists, it's gone from 16.5 to 16.1. For pedestrians, which is what most of the countermeasures were focused on, it's really good to see that we've got a bigger drop there from 16.5 fatalities and serious injuries being estimated to 6.3. So more than 10 fatalities and serious injuries the model's predicting that we'll save per year. Bicyclists from 16.5 to 13.2. So you can see, because our changes to the design were mainly focused on vulnerable road users, in particular pedestrians, the model has picked up on that and is estimating that that's where we'll see most of the benefits of the investment. So we've gone from a total of 66 or 10 fatalities and 60 serious injuries down to 51 per year. We still haven't put any information in for the investment plan. We haven't looked at the setup for that one. So now let's jump in and have a look at that. So I'm now looking again at the star rating for the design. I'm not looking at the existing road. We want to look at the design because I want to see if the model can recommend any other treatments in kind of an iterative process. So we've got our design 1. Let's see if the model can recommend some other treatments that could improve even more the safety of this road. So now we're going to jump straight into stage 6, the investment plan for the setup for the design. And we'll just run through this one quickly. Analysis period, 20 years. We use this as a default. Discount rate, 12%. GDP per capita. So a rule of thumb that we use is to calculate the value of life. You can use a factor of 70 times the GDP per capita. So this is saying richer countries are able to invest more money in their road networks to make them safer. They've got more resources available. It might be slightly crude, but this is the reality. So we're just going to put in some hypothetical data here. So let's say we've got a GDP per capita of 700. You'll notice here that it mentions using the local currency. So you can look this one up on there's a World Bank website or You'll be able to Google this one and have a look at the local currency for whichever project you're working on, the GDP per capita. I'm just going to put in some hypothetical data here. So let's say we've got a GDP per capita of 700, a value of life multiplier here of 70. So this value here, if you want to know more about where this one comes from, take a look on the iRAP website. There's a paper that was written, the true cost of serious crashes, and that value there has been adopted by the World Bank as well. So it's a pretty good rule of thumb that we use. And let's click now on calculate from GDP multiplied by the value of life, and that gives us a value of life, or how much a road authority can afford to invest to save a life of 49,000, 70 times the GDP per capita. Next up, we have a value of a serious injury multiplier. So this is saying the cost of a serious injury is going to equal a quarter of the cost of a fatality. That's the default value that we use. There's no, if there's no official figure available, then leave that one. And then we're going to click here on action, and we can calculate that one as well. Just letting everyone else catch up so they can see what they can follow my screen. There we are. So now we've got a value of a serious injury and a value of life, and we're going to leave this serious injury to fatality ratio of 10:1. The qualification value, so this is a threshold. We want to make sure that every countermeasure that has a benefit to cost ratio of more than 1 is recommended in the model. If, for example, we've got limited funds and we wanted to change that to make sure we only see the countermeasures that have a really high benefit to cost ratio, we can change that one, for example, to 5. However, for this project, we're going to leave that one as 1. And again, you need to put in here where you've got your data from. Hypothetical. And it's not allowing us to change any of the costs for countermeasures here, which is the next step, because we need to save the changes that we've just made. So here we go. I'm going to click down under this table, save stage. That's now saved. Now what we want to do, we've looked at the benefit part of the equation. So in saving lives, what's the benefit to society in terms of the reduction in fatalities and serious injuries? Now we need to look at the cost side of the equation, which is how much will certain countermeasures cost to implement. And once we've got those two, we'll be able to do a simple benefit cost ratio. So there are 2 ways to make changes to this table here, which is the countermeasure cost. The first one, and I'm going to show you now, is to simply download these costs with this button here on the right hand side, download costs. Just going to click on that one. And it's asking me what I want to do. I'll open that one in Excel. And I'm going to make changes directly into this Excel spreadsheet here. Now, to save some time, I'm only going to change a few. So let's just pick a couple here. The first countermeasure I'm going to put costs in for is going to be improved delineation. So in this file, you'll see a countermeasure ID code, a name of the countermeasure. You can ignore the carriageway code. Unit of cost is what cost we're looking at. Some items are per intersection, others are per kilometer, others are per lane kilometer, and per unit. So for the case of the improved delineation, we're looking at how much is it going to cost per lane kilometer to improve the delineation on the road. So I'm just going to put in some hypothetical data again here. And up the top, you'll see we've got 6 different options: rural low upgrade cost, rural medium upgrade cost, rural high upgrade cost, and then the same again for urban: urban low, urban medium, and urban high. So you might remember in the first webinar, one of the items that we were coding was the upgrade cost. So how much the adjacent roadside is going to impact on the cost of a treatment. For example, if you're on a bridge structure, then if you had to install or construct an extra lane of traffic, it's going to have a really, really high cost. Or if you're in the middle of nowhere, there's grass on the other side of the road, you don't have services, you don't have any earthworks that you need to do, the cost is going to be quite low. So some of the countermeasures, for example, improved delineation, the cost, what's happening on the side of the road isn't going to have a huge impact on the cost of this treatment. So in this case, let's just say that the cost of improving delineation is going to be 1,000. And again, this is in the local currency. So 1,000, let's say dollars, for all of the different options here, from rural and urban, and low cost, medium, and high cost for both. So let's leave that one there now. Pick another one. I'll pick another countermeasure here. Delineation and signing at intersections, for example. So perhaps this is going to have a cost. We're looking at per intersection now, so perhaps this will have a cost of 500. Again, hypothetical data here, so for your practical assignment, you're going to use different costs. And let's pick one more. Central hatching. Let's say this has a cost of 1,300, and this one will have more of the what's happening on the sides of the roads will have an impact. The land use will have an impact on the cost. You might need to create extra road width if you've got services adjacent to the road, or you need to deal with resumptions, then the cost is obviously going to go up. So let's say that the cost changes from 1,300 to 1,500 to 1,700 for rural, and 1,500, 2,000, and let's say 3,000 here for urban high cost. So I'm going to save this spreadsheet now, and remember where you're saving it. I'll put in a name for this one, costs, and remember to save it as a CSV file. Okay. Let me just refresh my screen here. Jump back into stage 6. And we've got this option here on the left-hand side of the screen now, which is upload costs. So I'm going to click on that. Find where I saved that file to, and I'm going to click on open. Vita will process that and won't take too long. There we go, costs uploaded successfully. They don't update straight away. You'll need to refresh your screen. And again, jumping back into stage 6, I'll scroll down, find that table again. And there you go. You can see those changes that we made to the spreadsheet have now been reflected in this table. The other way to make changes, and I'm going to show you here, is using this option down the side on the right-hand side, edit. So I'm going to click on improve delineation, the change that we made. I'm going to change, I'm going to say the service life, it's a rainy part of the world, so I'm going to say that delineation won't last 5 years, it's only going to last 3 years. So the model says, okay, to get to your design horizon of 20 years, you need to go back and reapply this treatment every 3 years. And another really important step, on the right-hand side, the models, if we have this one selected where we've got ignore, the model's basically going to skip this treatment. We have this option. We've got a list of 92 different possible countermeasures that the model tests every 100 meters. In some road authorities, some of them aren't practical. For example, in some countries, road authorities don't want to see roundabouts recommended. So we've got this option here to ignore certain treatments if they're not desired in our Safer Roads investment plan. So for the treatments that I've just put in costs for, I'm going to remove this little option here of ignore. I'm going to save that one. Let's go down, delineation and signing at intersections. Again, I'm going to remove this option here of ignore. Again, if you wanted to change the costs, you can do it here as well. Going to save that. And the last one, central hatching. I'm going to remove the option of ignoring that one. And I'm going to click on Save Changes. You'll be able to see the options that the model is testing in this ignore column. Sorry, let me go back up. In this column here where we've got ignore, the ones that are in red, they're the ones that the model is passing over. So any that are in gray, for example here, improved delineation, the model will test every 100 meters to see if it's a viable treatment. So now that we've put in some costs for certain treatments, and we've also put in some economic values for the benefits up here, I'm going to process this data set once more. So jumping into stage 7. Let everyone catch up. And I'm going to reprocess that one once again. Okay, now we'll jump back into this tab here that we've got open, which is the comparison of the results. Now, once that one's processed, I'll be able to click refresh here. Taking a while to load. And I'll jump into the investment plan now and click on the SRIP table, the Safer Roads Investment Plan table. And if we've done this right, you'll be able to see that for the existing road, we didn't put any economic values and we didn't put any countermeasure costs, so we don't have any treatments recommended. However, for the design case, the model's saying, based on this hypothetical calibration that you did and hypothetical costs, these are the treatments that we're recommending. And if I click on that link now, you should be able to see on the map, and I zoom in, you should be able to see exactly where those countermeasure suggestions are recommended. So for example, here we've got delineation and signage at the intersection at kilometre 0, kilometre 0.1, and kilometre 1.1. Close that one. For central hatching, based on our hypothetical data, central hatching has been suggested for the entire length, so from kilometre 0 all the way through to kilometre 1.1.
And Morgan, one other thing I think it would be worth showing people is like the star rating report and explaining the before and after filter, just so that we can, well, it's going to be necessary for people's assignments. So one
Okay.
last piece to demonstrate.
So jumping in the menu option here, star ratings. So make sure you've got the new reports shown. I'll just show you the difference between the two here. So if you go back to the older reports, it'll look like this one. Make sure you're looking at the new reports. So I've just clicked on used new reports, and that one's processing. And again, up the top, filter 1 is showing the existing road. The star rating for that one. And down the bottom here, we're looking at the design road. And we can also have a look at the before and after star rating, particularly for the webinar design. We can have a look at how the road would be rated if you were to go and apply those treatments that were recommended in the Safer Road Investment Plan. So you see here, we haven't changed for vehicle occupants. This from 2-star, we haven't moved up to the next star rating band. But let's have a look now for example, pedestrians. We've now got a 4-star road after. Let's have a look at what the before was. So a 3-star road. So the changes that were made to the design from the base case, let's show all 3. So looking at the existing road now. So we had a 1-star road for pedestrians in the existing on the existing road. In the design, that moved up to a 3-star road. And then with this second iteration, if we were to apply the treatments suggested in the Safer Road Investment Plan, clicking on after here, that's moved up again to a 4-star road.
Great, thank you for that, Morgan. So that demonstration that Morgan's just done is really explaining how you're going to do your assignment as well. So the assignment sets out the data that we suggest you use, and then pretty much asks you to do that same process to calibrate your data sets, estimate the number of lives saved, then produce an investment plan. Ali, do we have any questions? Quite a long demonstration, and probably people will need to go back to the video and watch it a little bit more, but do we have any questions that we could run through now?
Yes, we have many questions here. I will already apologize and post some of them on Schoology tomorrow and answer them. So Estiara is asking, is the star rating score for design lower than for existing? Could you explain why and how you determine the star rating score for design?
Good questions. And so I think if you did the assignment the same way and did the coding the same way as us, the star rating should be better for your design than for your existing road. But it totally is possible for the star rating of a design to be worse than the existing road. So let's say you changed the speed limit. Your design is to say we're going to change the speed limit from 50 kilometers an hour to 100 kilometers an hour. Speed has a big impact on the risk, and therefore the star ratings would go down. So it's absolutely possible for the star rating to go down. the way that the star rating is calculated for a design is exactly the same way it's calculated for an existing road. So it takes the road attribute coding, applies those crash modification factors that we mentioned in webinar 1, and then puts them together to calculate the score. And so the model itself, it doesn't actually know whether it's looking at an existing road or a design. To it, it's just getting coding data. And so it just treats that coding data in exactly the same way. If you need to know a little more about the methodology, definitely jump into those fact sheets on our website, which have a bit more information. And of course, if you want to get into more detail and discussion, absolutely happy to have that discussion offline as well.
Okay, and Brett is asking, what scale of calibration should we undertake? Whole of network or road link level?
Yeah, that's a nice question. It really depends on what your aim is with your assessment and the quality of your data. We have done many projects where the client says, all right, although you're looking at a network of roads and maybe we're looking at 5,000 kilometers of roads, they might say, because we have good crash data on a road basis, we prefer you to calibrate each of those roads separately so that our estimates of the numbers of lives saved as a result of doing work is potentially a bit more precise. That's totally fine. It is a bit more work, quite a bit more work, because it means you have to set up a separate data set for each one of the roads, as opposed to having one data set that's calibrated for the whole network. But it's absolutely possible. And so it relates to exactly what sort of work you're doing. You're doing network level analysis and you want to say, for example, across our network, broadly speaking, what level of investment do we need to get to 3 stars or better? Or what level investment would we need to make sure that the roadside risk is reduced to a tolerable level? That sort of network calibration might be fine, but if you're doing a very detailed analysis, you have very detailed designs coming through on a road by road basis, you might prefer to calibrate on a road by road basis.
Okay, how accurate are the World Bank and UN figures for countries where there are issues with local data collection and reporting? Would the results from all these analyses be the true picture of what's happening in such countries? And we had another question saying, what if we don't have data for fatalities and severe injuries?
Yeah, that's a very nice question. It's one of these situations where, like, if we have no data, we have to do the best we can. And that's where these rules of thumb really come from, is the idea that if we have no data, no idea what the economic cost of a fatality is in a country, it's better to start somewhere than nowhere. And so the research that went into making that rule of thumb estimate, really it took together as much data as possible from as many sources as possible and research, and came up with that simple estimate that could be applied widely. So, you know, when you talk about accuracy, in some places it's going to be really great, and some places perhaps not as good. So it's just a matter of doing the best you can with the data that you've got. And like in the long term or medium to long term, countries establishing that research base and research knowledge is really, really important, because it helps to build that evidence base and really guide investment in a targeted way. The question about where you get that fatality data from and to do that calibration, that's a tough one. Very often, like Morgan said, not all of that data will be available. Usually we can have a sense of how many deaths there are. Sometimes we know deaths by road user type. Occasionally we know deaths by crash type by road user, only occasionally. So it does mean that you have to have some expertise and knowledge about how to estimate those starting numbers. And it's really useful to talk to the road safety community about that, ask the experts that you know, try to find some research that might have been published, but also be transparent about your assumptions. Share your assumptions in your analysis with the people reading the report and relying on the results, so it's very clear, and give them the chance to comment. And you know, peer review sometimes can be a bit challenging, and and time consuming and sometimes lead to lots of discussion, but often it leads to very good results that everyone agrees on. So relying on the community of road safety experts and professionals is something that can really, really help.
And just to add to that one, Greg, for most of the projects that I've worked on, if the road authority themselves don't have good crash data, then the police might be able to help out. And if they can't help out, then the public health sector or the hospitals might be another good place to look.
Okay, one more question, and then we have many others that we didn't have time to answer. We'll post on Schoology for you tomorrow. We have one from Han. Currently, we only can compare two data sets on the new report scheme. We will have more filters as we normally have baseline, preliminary design, and detailed design for an entire project scope.
Yeah, Han, that would be really cool to have multiple, more than two filters. So yeah, you could look at the existing road, do what Morgan did, the existing road, the design number one, design with the investment plan. That would be really cool. Unfortunately, we don't have that function yet. I guess our developers, they only each have one brain and two hands, and we don't have that many developers working on it. So yeah, I'm sure it's on the list of things that they would love to put together as well, but hopefully we have it in the future.
Okay, and now our assignment, Greg?
Yeah, so as I said, the assignment is pretty much to do what Morgan did, but you're going to have a little bit different data and use your own data sets. So you're going to calibrate your existing data set. You're going to link that to the design data set to figure out how many lives and serious injuries could be saved as a result of that design, and then put together an investment plan to see what else could be done. And we've given you lots of flexibility in that investment plan. We haven't specified what data you must use, so it's really up to you to choose your data.
And if you haven't registered on Schoology, you register as a student, and then you add your course. So join a course and use your access code on Schoology. You have this look for our course there with resources. We'll post the video in a few hours for you there, and also the PDF version of this presentation for you. And your assignment you can submit directly on Schoology. You just click on Submit Assignment, and we'll post answers and comments, feedback for you there. If you have questions as well, you can find more information there. And our next session is on Thursday, the same time, and we'll talk about the quality assurance and reporting and question and answers again. So we look forward to have all of you there. And thank you for joining us today. Sorry for if we didn't answer your question. Thanks for sending and posting your questions. It was very interactive on this side, Greg and Morgan. And we have more information here. So as Greg said, you can find our fact sheets here on resources. All our methodology is available there for you. And please stay on the line and answer our feedback. It's very important for us to improve our webinars. And Greg, do you want to give your final words for today?
Just as usual, a big thank you to everyone for joining. Really important work that you're doing around the world on road safety, and I hope this webinar has been helpful.
Yes, thank you. Morgan?
Thanks, Sally. Thanks everyone for joining, and we'll see you again on Thursday.
See you. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.